Hello and welcome. I am Tim Blair, 2021 CCIM President and a partner at Shannon Waltchack. Welcome to today's webinar, Fireside Chat with the Real Estate Roundtable CEO, Public Policy and Commercial Real Estate. We're happy to share this webinar with everyone in the industry today as part of our 2021 CCIM Global Conference. For CCIM Institute members, this is just one of many member benefits that are designed to help you adapt and thrive in the ever-changing commercial real estate industry. Joining us today is Jeff DeBoer, President and CEO of the Real Estate Roundtable. Please feel free to ask questions throughout using the Q&A tab. We'll be answering as many as we can at the end of the discussion. And if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please use the chat feature to ask for help. The recording that is accompanying this presentation will be emailed to all registered attendees. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. Jeff is the CEO of the Roundtable, of the Real Estate Roundtable. Will you please let folks know a little bit about yourself and the Roundtable?
Well, sure. I'm the founding CEO and president of the Real Estate Roundtable. I'm very blessed in that world. The Roundtable, we started in 1999, and the idea was to connect CEOs, chairman, presidents, and CEOs of the largest commercial real estate firms in the country from all different product types, connect them with the trade associations representing the various aspects of the real estate industry, all with one mission and one mission only, and that is to work with members of Congress and the administration and staffs on public policy that relates to income producing real estate. So we work just in Washington. We used to be called lobbyists, but I think we're advocates now. That seems to be in vogue. And so we advocate for the right policies for the asset on a tax policy, banking policy, environmental issues, sustainability, climate, security related matters. And we try to connect what's going on in the real estate world to jobs and local communities. And we're very delighted that the National Association of Realtors and the various affiliates, CCIM included, are active parts of us. And our goal, again, is to try to find the right policy for the real estate asset itself. And we think that will help everybody who's involved in that asset. And I got to apologize. I'm on the phone this morning. I wouldn't normally do it this way, so I might squirm around a little bit more than usual. But thank you for having me, Tim.
Oh, well, thank you. Given how kind of fast things are moving in today's environment, Jeff, what I thought I would do is kind of ask you for your top 3 to 5 things that are pressing right now. And then we can kind of loop back and pick them off one at a time through the call. So what would be the top 3 to 5 pressing issues that we need to be talking about today here?
Well, one is probably not on your agenda, and that is the debt ceiling. You know, the government needs to increase the debt ceiling again on December 3rd. If it doesn't, the United States government will default on its payments. And obviously, the industry that is so concerned about financing and so forth, we can't have that. And so, number one, we've got to get Congress to pass the debt ceiling extension, and that'll come up here in the next few weeks. And then we have the bipartisan infrastructure bill. This is the bill that passed the Senate back in August. It would provide money to clean up and fix up and repair and retrofit roads, bridges, ports, and et cetera. It will also provide broadband to everyone. And by the way, it smooths the permitting process, and it provides monies to help clean up the power grid, by the way, which is very important to real estate and will be more important going forward from a climate point of view. And then we have the very big infrastructure bill that's currently in the news. Started at $6 trillion, then it went to $3.5 trillion, and now the debate is really joined forces on how much the government will spend in these areas, and then what the tax policy will be to pay for it. Within the tax policy issues, there's a lot of things that have come up that directly affect real estate. I'm happy to report that most of those are being resolved in a very positive way. But there's other issues within that, and we can talk about that. So there's a lot going on here. And by the way, the SEC and the bank regulators are talking about how companies and borrowers might have to report their ESG responsibilities. There's a lot going on. Housing, Fannie, Freddie, you know, so much that we all are very concerned about, just as Americans, but then concerned about because of real estate. So pay attention, strap your belts on, put your seat back in the upright position and get your tray tables up, because there is a lot going on here.
All right, well, I'm gonna scooch one item on top real quick, and then we can kind of start to work our way down the list. Talk to us about 1031 exchange and stepped up basis and that are so kind of valuable to us in the real estate industry.
Yeah, big issues. 1031. We were happy to join with the CCIM and the realtors and others, conservationists, in fact, all kinds of people, to educate members of Congress on what the 1031 issue means to the economy. And I'm happy to report that it's not in the House tax bill. It's not under consideration. I would put not my thumb, but my entire arm on the scale and say that 1031 is going to remain at current law and not be changed in this bill. So that's good. Step up in basis, same thing. Step up in basis, a very important issue. Obviously, real estate assets are primarily what people are concerned about here. Again, a lot of education, a lot of talking to people, a lot of working in coalitions, in this case with farm and ranch owners and so forth. And there again, current law on step up in basis. And the twin issue with that was there was a concept that was going to tax, create a realization event at death for people, and that's off the table. So no need to worry about step up, no need to worry about tax at death, no need to worry about 1031. Now, I will say within the estate tax area, there are changes that are being talked about and quite likely concerning contributions of appreciated assets into grantor trusts and things like that. But the bigger issues, and these are important, I don't want to diminish them, but the bigger issues of step up and 1031 off the table.
How about capital gains?
Capital gain, current law has it at 21%, I guess, and we're all in at 23.8. The House bill takes it up a little bit. I think that the worst, let's put it that way, that you could see capital gain in this bill, it might go to 25 plus the 3.8% that most people are paying, and everyone will pay after this bill. So it brings it up to about 28.5 or 28.8. That would be the worst that we could see on capital gain. But it's quite likely that nothing will occur on capital gain, shockingly enough. And I can go into that, but so capital gain will not get, I don't believe, any higher than 28%. And if it does change, the effective date on that, which is currently transactions after September 12th, I believe, that effective date, if they do anything, will move to the end of this year, whenever we have action, maybe in December or something. But again, good signals on capital gain.
Great, thank you. That is real world information that we can all use. Thank you very much.
Kind of shocking, isn't it?
Yeah. All right, debt ceiling. Talk to us a little bit about debt ceiling.
Well, the debt ceiling is so misunderstood, and all it is raising the ability of the government to pay debts that it's already incurred. It isn't raising the amount of debt or new deficit spending that a government can do, that the United States could do. It's simply making sure that we could meet our existing obligations. We reached that back in early October, I guess, and Congress kicked the ball forward for another whatever it was, but it now is set to expire. We've got to deal with that. And some kind of political football.
Jeff, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, let's try it again. For some reason, the sound got a little weird on that. Look, can we just take that one again from the top? Just debt ceiling. If you could just touch on that again. The sound got kind of weird in there for a second.
Is my sound okay?
You're perfect right now. Whatever you're doing right now is perfect.
Oh, all right. Well, I was simply saying that the debt ceiling it gives authority for the federal government to pay its obligations that we've already reached. It does not have anything to do with new debt or new deficit spending. Historically, the debt ceiling gets extended. This time, it's kind of a struggle. And again, I'm optimistic that it will get done, but it's going to require work and talking to people and make sure it happens. But it's very important, because if we default, if the government defaults, and we get downgraded, we still haven't recovered from a downgrade that the government faced a few years ago. So our bonds, it costs more and so forth. So it's very, very important. But I think that it'll get done by the end of the year.
Good, thanks.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the infrastructure bill and just its impact on real estate and, your view relative to the infrastructure bill in our industry.
Yeah, well, the first thing is the small bipartisan infrastructure bill. Excuse me, let me get a little water here. The bipartisan infrastructure bill doesn't have anything really directly for real estate, but obviously we need our infrastructure improved and upgraded. And we're talking about roads, bridges, public transportation, our ports. We obviously have a supply chain issue going on now. We need to upgrade our ports. We learned through the pandemic that a lot of people in America do not have access to the internet, and that's holding people back from an education point of view. And then, of course, we have these sewer lines and water lines that need to be replaced. So there's a lot of things in the bipartisan bill that has already passed the Senate that are very good indirectly for real estate, because it's good for educating the citizens. It's good for getting people to and from their jobs. It's good for people to be able to get to your developments on a easier way. And so we want this infrastructure bill to pass. It's passed the Senate. And what's going to happen now this week, by the way, is there will be a framework on the second infrastructure bill that I suspect will be agreed to this week. And once that framework is agreed to, then the House will pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and it could be done as soon as this week. There's nothing really negative in it that I can see. It's a good bill for America, and it needs to pass.
Thank you. And the second infrastructure bill, is that something that will follow on down the road?
Well, that's the big one. That's the one that I'm saying, that's the $3.5 trillion bill that is in the papers and everything. That's been whittled down. We're now talking about spending on the so-called soft infrastructure, instead of 3.5 trillion, somewhere between 1.5 and 2 trillion. Can you believe we're talking about numbers like this? But 1.5 and $2 trillion. And that's for child care. It's for elderly care. It's for all kinds of things that principally the left has been pushing on for years, but it has to be paid for. And so the big debate now has been bring that number down as close to 1.5 as possible. And it's down now between 1.5 and 2, and then figure out how to pay for it. And it's in that discussion where early on, 1031, step up, things like that were talked about and are now off the table. Now they look like they will finance it through nothing that directly affects real estate, but other items like the corporate tax rate, international tax issues, beefed up enforcement of tracking down people who owe taxes but have not yet paid them, some other provisions. The thing that has lit us up sort of in the last few weeks, the House bill was going to treat pass-through entities. So if you conducted your business not in corporate format, but as an LLC, subchapter S, limited partnership, what have you, the House bill, in our opinion, was dramatically altering the balance there to the disadvantage of pass-throughs. And obviously the real estate industry is a pass-through industry. And we went up and talked a lot to people on this and did a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of education. And the main issue there, the so-called 199A, for you tax mavens out there, 199A deduction, which essentially brought your pass-through income. So you got a distribution from a partnership, from a sub S, from an LLC, what have you, or a REIT dividend. That was taxed beginning in 2017 at 29.6. And the House was going to take that away. But I'm happy to report there again that I think we've knocked that out successfully. So we'll keep that balance between pass-throughs and corporate. The other thing that has come on the table here that is alarming, I would say, is, and it's not alarming at first blush, but as we look into the future, it's alarming. And that is, you're probably picking up a lot of information about the so-called billionaire tax. And this billionaire tax that the chairman of the finance committee, Ron Wyden, is promoting, and he's a fine fellow. We have good relations with him. But what he's proposing is called mark to market for billionaires. And what that means is that every year, if you're a billionaire, and I hope there's some on the phone, but I doubt it. But in any event, if you're in that category, your assets are marked to market every year. Your securities, your real estate, your jewelry, your art, your boats, everything is marked to market. If it's gone up in value, you would then, sorry, my ESPN thing came on there. You would mark to market and you would pay a tax annually, even though you didn't sell the asset. Now, we might all say, who cares about billionaires? But if history is any indication here, I would urge people to look back and see what happened with the income tax. The income tax was put in place in America in 1916, and it was supposed to apply to only the top 1% of taxpayers. Within 10 years, it applied to 20%. Within 15 years, it was 25%. And today, the income tax applies to us all. So this mark-to-market situation, which requires tax payment without a realization event again, is troubling to us, not because it affects billionaires, but because it creates a huge precedent. And in the future, we're highly, highly concerned about this. But other than that, I think, I think that the seeds are now in place for an agreement to be reached relatively quickly on a framework, how much they're going to spend and how much they're going to tax. And that framework will be agreed to here in the next few days. And then following that, they'll work on the details of what those tax items are. And as I said, 90% of them are already agreed to. This billionaire tax and a few other things are holding things up. But basically, this is going to happen, I think, by the end of the year. It'll be around $1.5 trillion or $1.6 trillion dollars, and we'll move on from this. It's been a terrible experience, I think, for everybody. And I would just conclude by saying this is a great example of reality colliding with expectations. And what I mean by that is, once the Democrats took the House, the Senate, and the presidency, there were a lot of pent-up expectations, and many of them, I suppose, rightfully so. I'm not criticizing them, but in addition to having expectations, the margins in the House and Senate were very close and continue to be very close, 50-50 in the Senate and only 3 votes for Democrats in the House. And therefore, even though there's great expectations on the part of progressives and the left in general, getting that through the moderates, more moderate Democrats, has proved to be the hurdle. And so expectations, meeting reality, bringing that 3.5 down, taking some of these onerous economic damaging tax increases off the table. That's what's been going on here as the sausage has been grinding its way through the system. And it's about ready to come out, I think, and it will come out. Whether it means anything to people will be another story, but it will get done, I think.
Great. I'm going to take a little quick side trip. Carried interest. Have you heard any talk about carried interest and how it kind of mixes into this stew? The tax on carried interest or elimination of it?
Yeah. I mean, what a saga that has been, right? And it's greatly misunderstood, I think. I've always argued that carried interest is basically, when you get right down to it, it's the percentage of the gain that someone gets that exceeds the percentage of cash that they've put into a transaction. So if you buy something for $100 and you put in $10 of cash, and you have other people put in the other $90, but on sale you want 20% of the gain, that additional 10% is carried interest. Okay. And it's used, obviously, real estate forever has used this. It motivates people. It aligns limited partners with general partners. It rewards the general partner, arguably, for taking the risk of the transaction. It's sweat equity in many ways. And that's what America was built on. Now, you can argue it from the other point of view, from the hedge fund and private equity, that it's used there and there's not so much risk. So this has been going on for a number of years. The current law, the effort has been to take capital gain carried interest up to ordinary income tax rates. We have resisted that. And in 2017, an additional holding period. To get capital gain, you hold an asset for a year. To get carried interest capital gain, you have to hold it for 3 years. In the House bill that is now in the mix of all of this, The holding period is taken up to 5 years for everything other than real estate, which stays at 3 years. Now, okay, that's good. But within the details of this, there are a lot of little issues that are now cropping up concerning when does the 3-year clock start? What if you're in a fund and you haven't closed out all the acquisitions within your fund? Does the clock start on each asset or does the clock start on the fund? So all of this is in play and it's very meaningful, frankly. But shockingly enough, it now appears that maybe carried interest is off the table in these discussions as well. And so maybe we'll have current law for everyone, as well as the holding period and as well as all these details that I'm talking about. I'm surprised to be saying that, but you've watched Senator Sinema, Senator Manchin, they're in the press all the time. Senator Manchin has worked to bring the spending numbers down, and Senator Sinema has expressed her concern about increasing capital gain, doing anything on carried interest, increasing the ordinary income tax rate, and a number of other things. And because of these margins that I talked about, 50-50, if you don't have every senator on board, you can't move it. So she is taking a lot of more damaging issues off the table. Again, though we don't play, we're kind of like Wayne Gretzky, we think about where the puck is going in the future. And when we think about that, we look at carried interest, and the House has now said whether they do anything further on carried interest this year or not. We now have the House of Representatives on record saying that real estate is different from hedge, different from private equity, different from venture capital in terms of carried interest. So for future battles on carried interest, where they will want to go to ordinary income tax rates, we will have a stronger hand on saying that real estate is different. It's not compensation for services, it's compensation for risk. And in our case, risk isn't just cash, it's other things that real estate entrepreneurs take to do their deal. I hope I haven't bored everyone. Is everyone awake out there? I hope.
I want to stand up and go, hallelujah. Thank you for that information. On behalf of a grateful industry, get back in there. Thank you. You're doing a great job. This is exactly what we want to hear.
Well, the funny thing, Tim, yesterday, the Wall Street Journal had an editorial about how real estate was getting crushed in this bill. And I read it. I go, what are they talking about? They could have written this editorial 6 months ago and it would have been accurate. But step up is off the table, as I said. The tax at death is off the table. Carried interest appears to be off the table. 1031 is clearly off the table. So I don't understand what the Wall Street Journal was talking about, saying the real estate industry was getting crushed here. And I like the Wall Street Journal, but they should tune in occasionally to current events, I think.
All right, thanks. Let's go ahead and pivot and talk about ESG. Kind of give us your thoughts on where we are with that and where to from here.
Sure. Well, I think like all of us, all of our companies, all of our individuals, we recognize that we need to be more environmentally sensitive, more social sensitive, more inclusive, more diverse, all of these things. And so the companies in all businesses are doing it, and certainly real estate is doing it. But some people in government don't think it's going fast enough. And so at the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, they're exploring ways to ask companies on their 10K to file more information about what they're doing, particularly in their consumption, their CO2 emissions and so forth. And so I would expect the SEC to issue a rule that requires people who have to file with the SEC or 10K to do some sort of disclosure on CO2 emissions. And again, that's not the end of the world unless they start asking people for what are the CO2 emissions of your tenants, or what are the CO2 emissions that are generated when you construct a building. Those things are not necessarily within the information circuit of owners, developers of real estate. And so, again, how far this goes could be a problem, and we're working with them on there in tandem with a lot of folks. And then the other side of the coin on this is the bank regulators. I think the federal financial institution regulators, the Fed, the FDIC, et cetera, I would expect them to be looking at a similar rule where they're going to ask banks. They haven't done it yet, but I could see them doing it. Ask banks to get this information from their borrowers, obviously, including real estate. And so again, saying I'm going to buy a building and it's got the following CO2 emissions is fine. But if they ask, what are your tenants doing and how are you doing? That's a little different, a kettle of fish, as they say. And so we want to be aware of that. The final thing that I would say is I think all of us, again, are quite sensitive to some of the problems and diversity issues and inclusive issues. And here at the Roundtable, we're trying to develop a B2B, business to business platform, an online platform that would connect minority, women, veteran-owned businesses with real estate people who are looking to use some of their discretionary budgetary spend for whether it's architects or construction or what have you. And right now it's difficult to identify these. So even if you want to do the right thing, sometimes you can't. So we're trying to develop this, and we may have something later. Later as the calendar days flip off, we may have something here coming up. That very important stuff.
Well, Jeff, actually, my follow-up is going to be the DE&I initiatives. That what y'all have going on. I'm at a conference right now with other owners of real estate firms, and that's just a very real issue that's out there for all of us. We were talking about it last night. How do we kind of take concrete steps forward with diversity and some of these initiatives? So this thing you're putting together will hopefully help people identify each other in a somewhat more frictionless format or something. Yes, and connect people. I was surprised, and I'm still kind of surprised that some enterprising person hasn't done this on their own, because it seems to me putting together a good list and a good certification program, this would make sense. But apparently it doesn't. So I think this is very, very important. The other thing along these lines that we're thinking about is, we've always looked at public policy from the prism of what's it do to jobs, what's it do to local economies, what's it do to property values and so forth. And we're going to start to also look at policy issues through what's it do to expanding opportunities, what's it do to helping people who historically maybe didn't participate as much in the economic growth that our country provides. And I think that's a very legitimate thing that to look at. And I hope that the industry supports that kind of effort. We've tried things, opportunity zones was enacted in 2017. And before that, it was empowerment zones. And before that, it was new market tax credits and everything. And these things haven't worked. Opportunity zones are, it seems to me, are working better than anything else. But there's other issues that I think we should look at in this area. So it's big for us. All right. And I'm glad you were talking about it, Tim. I'm glad you're at a conference and looking at it. It's it's pretty important. It is very real. I mean, it is. There's no simple answer to it, but it is a very, very real question that I think we all got to wrap our heads around and can use anything that's out there. Let me pivot and ask you, lob you a simple one. Talk to us about inflation. Well, I think that inflation, and that's the other thing, these bills that we just talked about, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the bigger infrastructure bill, the debt ceiling, all of these things, they're, I guess, fine. But what people are in the real world, I think, are highly focused on is the cost of gasoline, inflation in our industry, the cost of construction materials and so forth. But people are focused on labor supply issues, workers, as we reopen the hospitality industry and restaurants in particular, but others are having problems getting staff. Those are the kind of the real issues. And oftentimes people ask me, gee, does anyone in Washington focus on this? And I think the real answer is yes. These bills, in the back of everyone's mind is, inflation. Certainly Joe Manchin is trying to tamp down the spending, federal spending, and he wants it paid for. And that would kind of, not put another, kind of brick on the scale for
more inflation. So people definitely think about it and focus on it. It's, in the real estate world, inflation in some ways is not a bad thing, obviously. But I think we all, well, if you're as old as I am, you remember inflation in the 70s and so forth. And it's once it gets started, it's very hard to tame and get it back. And so, I think they need to really continue to focus on this, and policymakers do. The labor supply shortage is really a vexing one, and we'll see whether this is just a temporary thing where people are deciding not to go back to their old jobs, or whether it's a permanent shift. And we'll see on that. And for real estate, all of this kind of goes to how are we going to be developing and using our buildings for businesses and for people to live in and for people to shop in as we go forward. And obviously things are going to be evolving and changing as they always have, but the pandemic accelerates things, and we've got to have public policies, bringing it back to Washington, that allow and encourage and facilitate building owners to do what they want to do. Energy is just one thing. Some cities are saying, well, buildings, you've got to get to net zero by 2032 or something like that, or you've got to have clean energy in your buildings. Well, great. But if the grid does not allow clean energy onto it, how are we as building owners supposed to access it? And how are we supposed to make and acquire highly energy efficient components that cost more than the other ones when we don't get an immediate return on it? And so we're talking to members of Congress about how policy can help make sure we're flexible and can react to the new business, that we can be energy efficient like everybody wants us to be, and that we can access clean energy. It's one thing to say you want to, but if you can't, if you're in New York City, you can't get clean energy. And so the grid has to be opened up and modernized and so forth. And that's my speech on that, Tim. Thanks for getting wound up on that. I'm sorry about that.
We'll open it to some questions. Well, I mean, inflation it's going to impact us all, especially those that are going to have debt and buildings, and you have tenants, and how all that kind of stuff comes together. I mean, so, yeah. It is clearly kind of very large on all of our horizon. One question was, what product type do you think is most affected by the pandemic? Or, y'all serve a whole broad section. I think, office you have some experience with. Yeah. But what do you see as a segment that, or will all segments kind of come through, relatively speaking?
Well, okay. I know, look, I'm no market expert, and I know you are going to have some discussions about markets, and you'll have some really informed people. I would just say anecdotally, when this whole mess started, I think we all assumed that multifamily and retail was going to bear the brunt of this. Surprisingly, multi held up very, very well given the situation. I think retail has had a trending problem and continues to have a trending problem. But if you look at retail sales since the first of the year, they're very high, frankly, and going very well. Hospitality, set aside business hotels and so forth that cater to conventions, they've bounced back smartly, I think. Industrial's doing great, obviously. Data centers doing great and all of that. Then you get to the office market. And I think office, because of the longer term leases, was not a focus of potential problems when the pandemic started. But now, obviously, everybody is in the office world is kind of wondering, well, what's going to happen? Are people going to change their space needs? Are people going to want to travel into cities on public transportation, that given potential health risks and so forth? So office is nervous, but I think there again, if we have the right public policies that allow office to accommodate the new businesses, we'll be fine over time. And it just requires smart policy and people working on it. And on that note, I would just say, I think it's very important for all of us to be encouraging people to return to the workplace. I think it's good for obviously building owners, but it's also great for small businesses in urban areas. It's great for cities because they're losing a lot of tax money. but even more importantly, it's great for our younger people who need to be in the office and innovating and getting mentoring and everything. And we're going to fall behind from an international competitiveness basis, particularly with China, where they're back in business, they're in their offices, they're working away, and we continue to. And there's nothing wrong with working from home. God knows I love it, but younger people need that mentoring, that innovation, and that creativity that comes from being in the workplace. So I hope that public policy leaders will start speaking out on this as much as they spoke out about stay home to stay healthy. How's
Great.
that?
That's perfect. All right, one more question, and then we'll kind of start to wrap it up.
Okay.
And this is not a real estate question, but I am talking with somebody. You're in politics. This is kind of your daily world that you live in. Are politics more broken today than they have been? Or is politics always broken and you just kind of are always making the best of it? Should I be optimistic about, talk to me about where you see the state of current politics and will it get better? Or does it need to? Is it always like this and people always reflect horribly on the moment?
Well, a lot of people say that the system is dysfunctional and not working. I'll just be a little provocative here for a second because it's easy to say that, but these are people that are elected by their citizens in their districts to do what they want them to do. And if they didn't do it, they wouldn't get their job renewed. And so if people are voting no on things, I guess that's why what their people in their district wants them to do, or they wouldn't reelect them. Now, having said that, the gerrymandering of districts, lining things up and all of that, the personal attacks on people, the lack of even having a clear understanding and foundation of facts on different things is really, really a very bad thing. And it's a sad thing. I've been in this, I've been around public policy for a long time, and it's unfortunate, and it's gotten in some ways worse, but in some ways better. And I'll say why better in just a minute, but in some ways worse in that more and more you're either on one team or the other. You're either on the Republican team or the Democratic team. And those two teams really don't talk much. And the staffs don't talk much. And the lobbyists don't cross pollinate much, which is bad. And so, that's troubling. On the other hand, over the last couple of years, a group called No Labels has emerged, and they have started to bring people together in the center, the bipartisan people, and they've got a great caucus in the House, the No Label, the Problem Solvers Caucus. And frankly, in many ways, it is that caucus which has been able to drive these bills together to ultimately find a solution instead of everyone yelling at each other. So, on the one hand, it's worse than it was. On the other hand, I'm optimistic that it will get cleared up. But these things that are going on, chasing senators into bathrooms, surrounding senators on their boats, yelling at them, scratching on doors, not listening to the other side is really, 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 really bad. But I'm optimistic. Here, I'll end it on this one. Churchill had it right. He said, Americans will try everything until they get it right. And so, I expect a continuing period of personal vitriol and attacks and pushing people into corners for a while. But I think it ultimately will burn its way off and we'll get back to working together. By the way, this bipartisan infrastructure bill is a great example. If you just have some patience and you talk to people and you work with people, you can get folks. But when all you want to do is punish people, and one side wants to punish a certain category and the other side wants to punish, it's a problem. But that's my speech. We play it right down the middle. I don't care if someone is a Republican, a Democrat, an independent. It doesn't matter to me. We're going to talk about real estate, its importance to jobs, to communities, And last time I checked, real estate was everywhere. And so it doesn't matter. And it's, by the way, it's true. Healthy real estate markets are good for communities, they're good for people, they're good for everything. And that's what we're going to do. And we're going to continue to do it as well as we possibly can. And we're going to do it with a smile on our face and with a research and data in our back pocket.
Well, for the role you play in our industry, I'm going to paraphrase a line out of A Few Good Men. We want you on the wall. We need you on that wall. Thank you for looking out for our industry, and thank you for being exactly where we need you and looking out for our interest. It is sincerely appreciated.
Well, let me end by saying, thank you guys. I don't know anything about the real estate industry other than what people in the real estate industry tell me. And so my door is always open. Our door is always open for views and perspectives and information from everyone, CCIM in particular. This is a great group, a very smart group, a very sophisticated group. And any kind of information that you want to send our way is great. And when I talk, and it sounds like I'm slapping myself on the back, I'm slapping the industry and the trade associations, the realtors, the ICSC, BOMA, NAIOP, all of us have worked together on these things, and we need to continue to do it, just like people in Congress need to continue to do that. So thanks for having me. It's been fun. I feel great. I'm sorry about my computer, and I hope the sound has been good and all of that. So thank you very much.
All right, Jeff, thank you again for sharing your expertise with us today on this webinar. And thank you to everyone with us today for attending. As a reminder, the recording will be emailed to all registered attendees. And if you're not already a CCIM Institute member or course participant, take a moment to sign up for our e-newsletter at ccim.com to stay informed about complimentary webinars like this one, as well as other professional development opportunities. Again, have a great day, and thanks to everyone. Jeff, take care, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.